Anyone who takes on the task of writing a new Conan story must inevitably draw comparison between themselves and the character's original creator, American literary legend Robert E. Howard. Of course, if anyone should even dare to measure up, it would be comic book veteran Chuck Dixon, who cut his teeth on Marvel's Savage Sword of Conan magazine throughout the 1980s. But how does this new novel, The Siege of the Black Citadel, fare in the age of modern fantasy? And how well does it stand up to the barbarian anti-hero's near-century-long legacy? Hi there, I'm Tim from Secret Fire Books, and this is my review of Chuck Dixon's Conan, The Siege of the Black Citadel. Black Citadel's premise is promising enough, which is to say that it's about as classic a setup as a Conan story can get. Our favorite savage finds himself as a mercenary in the service of a rebel army as they lay siege to a fortress whose overthrow could turn the tide of a bloody civil war. When his superiors send him on a mission to scout out a reported secret entrance in the fort's defenses, Conan instead learns of a vast treasure hoard stashed away in the titular Black Citadel. His lust for gold and adventure stoked, Conan plans to use the impending siege as a cover while he and his fellow sellswords plan a heist of the Citadel's vaults. Of course, as is the case with any good sword and sorcery story, there are dark powers at work within the Citadel's walls, just waiting to be unleashed on the unwary treasure seekers. The novel's first, and perhaps greatest strength, is the writer's sheer appreciation for the stories that came before it. Dixon clearly knows how to write Conan as much as the savage world he inhabits. While other writers, particularly those of the 3 Conan feature films, have portrayed the iconic barbarian as a blunt, knuckle-headed bruiser, Dixon is sure to remember that the Conan of Bob Howard's original tales was as clever as he was powerful. Throughout the book, Conan is constantly planning and anticipating, using both his brains and his brawn to further his roguish, tomb-raiding endeavors. It's nice to see someone portray the character as he was always meant to be, and good to know that Dixon's reverence for the famous swashbuckler hasn't dwindled since his time with Savage Sword. At no point in my reading of Black Citadel did I feel like I was following a different character, or one of the many Conan derivatives that have been recycled and reused since his first appearance in the 1930s. This wasn't Deathstalker, it wasn't Hawk the Slayer, and it wasn't Gorgoth of Barbaria. This was Conan. This is the same character who climbed the Tower of the Elephant, the same character who slew Thek the man-eating ape-man, and the same character who conquered the throne of shining Aquilonia with his own bloodied steel. The fact that Dixon is able to so skillfully recreate that larger-than-life personality of Conan the Cimmerian is highly commendable, and it wins major points for me in this regard. Another point in the book's favor is its conservative page count. Conan never was one for lengthy tomes with pages that stretched on into the thousands, like modern fantasy novels. That in itself may be a turn-off for fans of more contemporary fiction, but for a classic, pulpy, slay the monster and steal the treasure kind of story, Black Citadel does just fine clocking in at only 120 pages. Bob Howard always made sure that his readers could blast through a whole adventure in a single afternoon, and Chuck Dixon seems to be more than happy to save them some reading time as well. The book's biggest flaw, however, is how it chooses to spend its brief time. While the action is gritty and visceral, as it should be, it's just a bit too spaced out. Aside from an exciting skirmish at the beginning, Black Citadel doesn't serve up much of Conan's signature barbaric violence until the very end. The interim, something like 7 chapters worth, is divided between Conan planning his brilliant heist, step by grueling step, and the unfortunately forgettable villains planning to foil him and his allies. It seems that, unless it's a scene where Conan is either splitting skulls or wooing wenches, Dixon is content to let the plot drag without anything of real substance occurring. When something exciting does finally happen, it's absolutely glorious, but then it's right back to the procedure of a long, boring siege for dozens of pages. Another awkward downside is the double-edged sword of Dixon's familiarity with the source material. It's clear that Chuck Dixon knows his Conan, but he also tends to treat the readers as if they know just as much. As an avid Conan fan myself, I didn't mind the story's abrupt beginning, throwing us into the middle of the plot without caring to give us context to Conan, his allies, or the fictional Hyborian realm as a whole, but I have a feeling that some other readers might. Dixon name-drops plenty of Hyborian age names like Kush, Vanaheim, Turan, and even the Cimmerian war god Crom, but never gives any background or elaboration for those names. By comparison, the original Bob Howard stories always presented the elements of his fantasy world in a way that would make the reader feel familiar with the setting, even if they didn't know every detail about it. The author of this book, however, doesn't try to write that way, assuming that the reader will just get it. It definitely isn't something that will engage new fans who have never read a Conan story before. But then again, maybe that wasn't the point. It does, after all, seem to be a book written by a Conan fan, for Conan fans. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's near impossible to recreate the pulp fantasy magic of Howard's original writing. Thus, ultimately, I can't hold the very talented Mr. Dixon to such a high standard. Despite the book's shortcomings, it still manages to spin a dark, bloody yarn that fans of classic heroic fantasy will enjoy. Interestingly enough, the book touts the subheading Chuck Dixon's Conan No. 1 on the front cover. Perhaps this is simply the first chapter of an ongoing series yet to mature and improve upon itself. If so, it could definitely be in worse hands than those of Chuck Dixon, who seems to love the Hyborian mythos as much as the hardcore fans do. Hopefully he'll keep at it, and, by Crom's Bloody Mountain, we'll see Conan and his savage sword and sorcery again sometime soon. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit the like button, and if you want more reviews like this one, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. And if you happen to be a fan of pen and paper role-playing games, please check out my book, Castle of the Crystal Blade. It's a single-player adventure book in which you play a wandering barbarian, kind of like Conan, and explore an ancient haunted castle full of monsters and treasure. If you're interested, the Amazon link is in the description. Until next time, farewell, and keep reading.